Hello and welcome back to This Day in History. It is August 31st, 2024. As you know, it's not about the date, the year rather, it's about the magic of the date. And we have some pretty interesting stuff here. It's like, I don't know, page and a half of stuff. So let's get into it, shall we? So the very first birthday, it's year 12, as in 12 AD, because, I don't do the whole BCE, CE. It's not Common Era. It was either before Christ or it was, AD, whatever the Italian, Latin, anyway, whatever. It's 12 AD, or if you are of the Common Era, it would be 12 CE Common Era. We see the birth of Roman Emperor Caligula. He was known as Little Boots growing up. He was kind of a fan favorite of all the Roman soldiers. They absolutely loved him when he was a little boy. That's why they called him Little Boots. He was known to, play soldier, and so the Roman soldiers absolutely loved him as a boy. They revered him. He eventually became emperor. But he was born on this day in the year 12. He reigned from 37 to 41. So, to put in context, he was emperor just a few years after Christ's crucifixion. If that kind of puts into context. But he didn't last very long as a Roman emperor himself. He was actually, he was murdered himself, pretty young. So he was, he reigned until 41. Well, 41 is when he was killed. So he was, something like 36 years old, I think. 12, 24, 36, 24. I'm mathing here. So he's like 35. And so I'm like 35 years old. 25 years old. Right? 24, 36. Yeah, he was like 25. Anyway, so that was Caligula. The year is 161, and now we see the another Roman emperor. We see the birth of Commodus. If you've ever seen the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix played Joaquin Phoenix character. That was a Hollywood depiction of Emperor Commodus, and he was actually a lot worse, historically speaking, than how they depicted him in that movie. A lot worse. Another emperor's birthday is 1569. Jahangir, Jahangir, He was the emperor of India, born in 1569. 1945, we see the birth of Van Morrison, who was an Irish singer-songwriter. 1949, we see the birth of Richard Gere. That's an American actor and humanitarian. He was Pretty Woman. He was in, I think that was The Jackal that he was in. He's been in Officer and a Gentleman was another one that he was in. He was a good movie, which was a decent movie. He's been in a lot of good movies. Humanitarian. He has been real big on the Free Tibet movement, as in like imploring the Chinese government to give up its claim of Tibet and allow Tibetans to be to rule themselves autonomously and be their own, to be recognized as their own sovereignty. 1970, we see the birth of Rania Al Abdullah. She is the Queen of Jordan. So, happy birthday to Queen Al Abdullah and Richard Gere. I think Van Morrison, I'm not sure if Van Morrison's still alive or not. But that's the birthdays for today. Also, it being August 31st, it is my brother Christopher's birthday. He's my older brother was a half brother, and Christopher was his half brother. I say was because my older brother is passed. So Christopher's still alive, obviously. But we're not blood related, but we basically tell people we're brothers because it's easier to explain. It's easier to say, hey, this is my brother from Oregon, or this is my brother from Texas, as opposed to say, this is my half brother's half brother. So to my brother in Texas, happy birthday. Miss you, buddy. Hope you're well. So that does it for the birthdays for today. The very first event is the year is 1751. Robert Clive, British. The British Army seized Arcot, India. They withstood a 53-day standoff that began a few weeks after they had seized Arcot. Pretty impressive, really. The year is 1850, as in like 50. 1850, King Kamehameha III officially declares Honolulu City to be the capital of his kingdom. If you've ever watched Hawaii Five-0, there's this big, huge statue in front of 50 PD, right, in the show. That is, there's this big, huge statue, and that's actually that's the statue of it's Kamehameha, but I don't know. I think it's Kamehameha the first, actually. So I think that was this guy's grandfather. 1888. Here's where we get into some dark stuff. The year is 1888. A mutilated body is found in Whitechapel, the Whitechapel district, which is London's east side. It was believed that the body of Mary Ann Nichols was the first victim of Jack the Ripper. 1966, we fast forward to the 60s now. In 1966, this is an innovation in aviation. The Harrier jump jet fighter bomber makes its very first flight. Now, the Harrier, it's a British British aircraft. I mean, they're the ones that usually use Harriers. I think we have some in our naval fleet, but the Harrier got its start in the British Air Forces. I don't know if they were Navy or their equivalent of the Royal Air Force or whatever. But so in G.I. Joe, we have this thing called the VTOL, the Sky Raider, right? VTOL meaning vertical takeoff. And if you're familiar with the Harrier, what's great about the Harrier is that it literally is a vertical takeoff. It can take off in a vertical fashion just like a helicopter, or it can go down a runway and fly off like a plane. It's used in a very limited capacity. I mean, we do have some Harriers in our fleet, obviously, and there's only certain ships that the Harriers can actually land on because of the vertical jets. They burn at such a hot temperature that they literally would melt the surface off the flat top of the vessel there that they're landing on. They have a special there's a special chemical bond they slather down there, and they only do it in certain sections where those Harriers are actually where they go land, right? They don't come in, and they're not on the catch system like other bombers are in our U.S. Navy. They actually land vertically, and because they land vertically, there's only certain spots where they can land vertically because of the high temperature of their jets. Will literally melt holes into the surface there. So those sections there are specially treated with, it's a special chemical that resists that high temperature. And but what's really cool is that it's on this day in 1966 that the Harrier made its very first flight. So I think it's kind of cool. In 1980, Polish labor activist Lech Walesa and the first deputy premier, Myśla Jagielski. It's Polish. Forgive me. I have some Polish ancestry, but I don't know anything about that culture. These two signed an agreement that conceded workers' rights to organize freely and independently. So they were given, basically the freedom of assembly. In 1991, a couple of the stands, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, they both declared their independence from the Soviet Union. A year later, on this day, an 11-day standoff in Ruby Ridge comes to an end with Randy Weaver, who was a self-proclaimed white separatist. He surrendered. 3 were killed during that altercation, during that standoff, and Vicky, his wife, and Sammy, his son, were killed in the altercation, as well as a U.S. Marshal by the name of William Deegan. All 3 died in this, stupid standoff. The Clinton administration got a lot of heat for that. I mean, it was... it was 92, so it kind of set up the whole Waco thing, because they had a similar standoff, in April, I believe it was. It was April of 1993. I was a senior in high school when I was watching this whole stuff go down on the news at the time. And so these armed standoffs with, militant anti-government types, and they were clashing with federal authorities. And it was one of the reasons that Timothy McVeigh had cited for why he bombed the Oklahoma City bombing at the Murrah building in Oklahoma City there. One of the reasons that he cited was his views against the government, his, how the government is, doing, he thought that Waco was unnecessary, Ruby Ridge was unnecessary, and, take that for what it is. I mean, you could agree with him, you might not agree with him. The bottom line is that if they went in these complexes, they went in with warrants. So, my thing is, it's better to be judged by 12 than to be carried by 6. Even my own sister, she thinks the government overreacted with Waco, and I'm being law enforcement driven because of my stepdad. I'm like, well, they had a legitimate warrant. They had to show just cause to a federal judge to sign off on that warrant, and they went to go execute that warrant. So, you don't have a right to tell law enforcement, I reject your warrant. It's like, go have your day in court. So the Branch Davidians chose not to. Weaver chose not to. He chose to have an armed standoff with the federal government, and, his wife and son got killed over it. So, that's kind of what happens when you pick a fight with the federal government. Like, one thing they're really good at is making you dead. 2016, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff was impeached and removed from office. Their Senate, the Brazilian Senate, had found her guilty of using state bank funds to cover up a budget deficit in run up to her reelection in 2014. So it was found that she had essentially embezzled funds from the federal government and misappropriately used those funds. And well, there you go. So our featured events, we have a couple featured events here. It is on this day in 1864. We talked about the Battle of Manassas, the Second Battle of Manassas, and how Stonewall Jackson mud stomped a Union general, John Pope. Excuse me, John Pope. It's on this day in 1864 that Sherman is, he's knee deep in his march to the sea, as it were, and so the Confederates. It's on this day that the Confederates, they start evacuating Atlanta, Georgia, before the Union troops arrived, because what Sherman was doing was that he was literally burning everything in his path. So he burned this big long swath right through Georgia on his way to the to the sea. William Tecumseh Sherman occupied the city, which was a much needed victory for the Union. And it was very debilitating for the Union, or for the Confederacy, to lose Atlanta. It was a hub. It's kind of like when they lost Chattanooga. That was a main railroad exchange there. And so when the Union took Chattanooga, it was a huge blow for them. They took Atlanta, another huge blow for them. And by that point, they pretty much had, they basically had everything all sewed up, for the exception of what was going on in what was known as the Western Theater. That would have been, part of Texas, Missouri, Kansas area, and, the, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, all those areas, those were the Western Theater, and they needed to be sewed up. But this was a huge deal it was a huge deal for both sides. And the Confederates realized that they were going to lose, and so they started to evacuate the city of Atlanta. And I've been to Atlanta a few times. I've ridden their MARTA, which is their commuter train that goes from the airport to downtown area, and you can still see the lingering effects. There's kind of like a spiritual connection to it, but you can still see the lingering effects of how they kind of feel like they never really truly recovered from such a debilitating blow like that. And unfortunately, it's like, that's the casualties of war, right? When you go to war, your job is to go smash your enemy. You smash them so, that they can't recover, right? At the close of the war, Lincoln really desperately wanted to have reconciliation. He was going to work towards reconciliation. He did not want the Reconstruction period, to be what it ended up being. That's why they called them the Radical Republicans. They were hell-bent on punishing the South for even daring to secede from the Union, which is not what Lincoln wanted. Lincoln wanted peace. He wanted to welcome them back into the fold as brothers. We were a nation of, he wanted to welcome them back into the brotherhood, and, make it known that it's like the best way to heal is to, water under the bridge and move on. Which, to his credit, Andrew Johnson tried to insist on that, and for his trouble, he got impeached over it, although he was never kicked out of office. After the impeachment trial, and he successfully defeated the impeachment trial, he was basically a figurehead for the rest of his duration as president. Lincoln's second term, or his second term as president. Johnson rode that out. He kind of faded away after that. He never got, he was never reelected. He was never elected in his own right. So he basically filled out Abraham Lincoln's second term, and then he faded off into obscurity because he clashed so much with the Republican Party that he was basically ineffective. He was a puppet head for the remainder of that term, and then just went away. Kind of like how I wish LBJ would have just went away. But whatever. So the second featured event is, and this is a tragic one, so we're ending on a tragic note here. Lady Diana, Princess of Wales, Princess Diana. We talked about her recently, with that being the anniversary of her divorce with Prince Charles. It is on this day, sadly. It is on this day in. I didn't write down what year it was. Oh, it was 1999, I believe. No, it wasn't either. She died at the age of 36. She was killed in a car crash in Paris, France, and I believe it might have been 96 or 7. See, I'm trying to remember because my buddy Doug was still living here, and he hadn't moved to Australia yet, and I think he left for Australia in 97. I think. Anyway, it's been a good long while, and this is the anniversary of her passing. And we're sad about that because she was a wonderful human being, humanitarian speaking. She was a good mom that I could see. She very much protected her sons, and she would implore the media to have a proper space, and she would ask the paparazzi to at least leave her boys alone, let them be children, and give them their space. Obviously, paparazzi could never do that. They never could respect boundaries. It's one of the reasons why she is dead. The paparazzi was chasing her around in Paris. She was seen. I want to say he was from Morocco. I think he was a prince from Morocco or something like that. I can't remember what it is, but she was actually pregnant with his child. They were to, she was pregnant with his child when she died, and it turned out that their driver had been drinking, and the crash was caused by paparazzi literally chasing them all over town, and the guy trying to, get out of the limelight and outrun them. And they were taken into a tunnel, and where they crashed. And unfortunately, the driver, who's drunk, survives, as I recall, and Princess Diana, and I want to say his name was Fayed. I might be mistaken though. He died too. So, and baby. So they all died because paparazzi, and this just absolutely floored me about the media. The media knows no bounds. They know no respect. They have no respect. They have no sense of decency when it comes to okay, take a few pictures and then leave the people alone. They couldn't do that. They literally hounded her to death. They chased her to her death. And I'm sorry, none of those assholes ever got any kind of slap on the hand for any of that. None of those guys that caused this accident were ever brought up on charges. And that's the messed up thing about the paparazzi. So if you're paparazzi, right, don't do shit like that. I don't care how famous someone is. They're an individual, and they do have a private life, and they are allowed to have their private life despite what you seem to think. So, leave them be. That's it for this day in history. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back at it again tomorrow for September 1st. Woohoo! This is Labor Day weekend, and I got me a new ride, as you can see. You'll notice that I'm not sitting in my Pontiac Grand Am. I'm now the proud owner of a Dodge Ram 1500 that I was blessed with, and I'm very blessed. So I'm thanking God for the blessings, the mercies, and the gifts that I'm given daily. And today's no exception. I'm a very blessed man. And so I want to say loud and proud here on YouTube that God is great. He is wonderful, and he answers prayers, and he is a loving, just, benevolent God, and will always do what's right for you. You may not think it's right, but he knows it's right because he knows what's up. And it's like when you follow him, everything will fall into place and everything's going to be okay. You can go through a hard time, you can go through, whatever you're going through. Jesus is always the answer, right? He went to that cross for a reason, right? He went to save the world from its sin, but he also gave us a means of going to him when we have a troubled heart or whatever. So think of this as like a little small mini sermon, but it's definitely I'm going to proudly worship and praise God. I'm going to do it publicly. I'm going to do it right here, whether you like it or not. You can just, whatever. If you choose to leave me a comment and you choose to say something very foul about, the Lord or whatever, just know that I will defend my faith. And not that God needs me to defend him. He can do a pretty good job of bowing any knee to him, but it's a respect thing, right? So I would ask that if you don't agree with my lifestyle, you don't agree with my views, I am a Christian, kindly keep it to yourself. Let's have a decorum of peace, love, and respect. So that being that, I'm signing off now. Have a great day. Be blessed. And I'll see you tomorrow, September 1st. All right.